This is the Used Car Dealer Podcast with your hosts, Zach Klemp and Steve McClory.
Well, Happy New Year. It is 2020 finally, and we apologize for the long wait since episode 3, but this is episode 4 of the Used Car Dealer Podcast. I'm Zach Klemp.
This is Steve McClory.
And this is going to be one awesome episode. So what I wanted to start out with, and it's a question for you, Steve, is we reflect on 2019. What were some of the trends that you observed with used car dealerships, and what's the most interesting to you?
Oh, I'd probably say advertising spend. You know, in the beginning of the year, you know, you'd see a lot more of the Cars.com, Auto Traders, even TrueCar, and the car gurus, you know, the usual suspects. You know, the independent dealer was investing their money to get leads. And it really started to turn about 6 months ago, where now it's primarily Facebook Marketplace, car gurus, and sometimes TrueCar, right, depending on the geography, you know, some of those military areas. But complete change.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you. I mean, Facebook Marketplace is just becoming bigger and bigger, and it's definitely replacing Craigslist. And the interesting thing about Facebook Marketplace is that it's primarily focused on used cars, so not new inventory. So big opportunity for a lot of used car dealerships to get exposure. And of course, it's much more cost efficient than some of the third-party lead providers. And another observation I had in 2019 was digital retail. So a lot of digital retail products, they raised significant venture capital in 2019, but their big focus right now is franchise dealers. And for those of you wondering what I mean by digital retail, I'm talking about the e-commerce like checkout on a dealer website and those tools that provide that experience. And curious, Steve, what are your thoughts on digital retail when it comes to used car dealerships, not new car stores?
Well, I mean, it takes like a really special use case or segment, you know, the independent market that would take advantage or could see real benefit from investing in a tool like that. You know, and many dealerships today have some basic tools, but it's proven, you know, the more that you get the customer to engage on your website and even to the extent of completing part of that buying process, higher likelihood they're going to convert. But I have not seen a big sweep or change in dealers running out and investing in, you know, those types of digital retailing systems to complete as much as more of the transaction online as possible.
Yeah, I could definitely see how like a Highline used car dealership could leverage, you know, digital retail. But I definitely think for the average used car dealership, especially if you're doing buy here, pay here, it's really not the right fit. And right. I think eventually, though, there'll be more of those digital retail tools that have some integrations and more of a focus for the used car dealer use case, which often is, you know, subprime, you know, different type of credit than what new car dealers deal with. So when we think about 2020, what do you see as some of the hot trends, you know, coming down the pipeline?
Well, you know, it's really about knowing your numbers, understanding the market. More and more dealers are starting to invest in inventory management systems, you know, such as like a vAuto or a VinQ, Inventory Plus, you know, a lot of different options out there, but they're not always the most affordable for the independent dealer. But, you know, it's like there's a new generation coming up. I was just talking to a young man today who's 24 years old, has 2 locations, right, that they're solely relying on data, right, to make their buying decisions, understanding what's turning in their market, what they can buy for at a decent price in today's auction environment, right, where prices are as high as they've ever been. That's a huge headwind. But to solve the problem is, you know, a lot of dealers will ask me, even today a dealer asked me, well, how do I go from 60 to 90 units? And I said, look, it's in the math, it's in the numbers. But being able to really measure your business, you want it to grow, at some point you really got to get serious about it.
Yeah, well said. What do you see as some of the things that independent dealers, buyer payer dealers should stop doing in 2020 that we maybe saw in 2019 and earlier?
Oh, I don't know. Everyone's use case is a little bit different, right? And there's always, I guess there are a lot of challenges everybody faces. One of them, though, that I would say is, stop ignoring the pricing on your inventory and really pay closer attention to what's going on in the market. Because you might not know it, right? Like some of these even larger markets are not so large anymore. Your unit's under surveillance, right? That means that there is a larger group that has superior inventory technology, right? That understands that market. And you might have been, ninth or 10th in pricing in the market a week ago, but maybe now you're, 27th. Who knows? But check your pricing, make sure you're maintaining competitiveness. That's one. Check out your technology stack. Are you getting an ROI on your CRM, on your inventory management system? And don't neglect your website. I see a lot of dealers will take that low-cost provider and just kind of stick with it because it's easier. There's other options out there for just a little bit more money can provide a much better experience for your customer.
Yeah, it makes me think of the podcast we did with Tom Hampton, and he had this term called profititis, but basically what it means is don't be penny wise, pound foolish. And, from my observations, I definitely see a lot of dealers, skimping on the dealer website, for instance, and dealer websites, their digital showroom. That's the first place the consumer is going to go even before they visit your store. And if you have a clean, professional website, that just puts you in a better placement, against your competition. I think integration is going to become more and more important. There are a lot of legacy systems in the used car software side of the business. And, in 2020, integration is going to be more important. Cloud-based software is going to be more important. I definitely agree with you as well that, dealers have to start tracking their KPIs, whether that's inventory based, KPIs like turn time, or even when you look at third party lead provider spend, what's your ROI? What's your cost per sale? What's your sales cycle? What's working? What's not? And, really tracking your metrics month to month and not just looking at the end of the year and saying, what did we do well that produced results? So being more data driven, I think, is going to become more and more important for that independent dealer operator.
There's so many resources out there for the independent dealer. Just looking at, look up basic sales benchmarking dealership, right? And getting the fundamentals down and understanding your show rate, your conversion rate, knowing those numbers, how are you ever going to grow if you can't measure it? And it's a hard thing to do sometimes. Take the time to do it, but it's well worth it. But there's no silver bullet, right, Zach? I wish I could say one thing in particular. It's just different for whatever that use case is for that independent dealer.
Very well put. So I guess to kind of wrap everything up on, this episode, what are you excited about in 2020 in the independent dealer world?
Well, I think there's a lot of opportunity that's out there for independent dealers to compete at a higher level with some of the technology that's out there today. Being able to sift through it and find it, right, can be a challenge. But look, it seems to be that interest rates should stay about where they're at, right? So no hike in interest rates looks good for the auto market. The used car market continues to grow. So there's a lot to be optimistic about. Question is, are you going to take advantage of it? Right? And how are you going to do that? And I go back to it's all in the numbers. But anyhow, Zach, that's my simple words of advice.
Well put, Steve. And, my advice to dealers in 2020, again, be more data driven. Embrace the internet. The internet is kind of leveling the playing field in a sense because consumers, they're going to less dealerships before making a purchasing decision. They're doing the majority of their research online. Most dealers, they're posting their inventory on similar websites. So if you're data driven, if you purchase the right inventory, embrace the internet. It levels the playing field. It gets more exposure. Don't be against internet and the changing times, because kind of like what Mary Bear said, you're going to see more disruption in the next couple of years than the previous 50 years in the automotive business. So I'll cap the episode off with that. And, we promise to have a better cadence in terms of, putting out the Used Car Dealer podcast. And we're really excited about 2020, and we want to hear everyone's thoughts on what we should do in our next episode. So thanks again for listening to the Used Car Dealer podcast.